What if one object in a museum didn't just fool a few experts, but quietly rewired what you think you know about human history? What if an ancient-looking artifact, heavy, carved, photographed, catalogued, wasn't a window into the past at all, but a mirror, reflecting back the story we wanted to see? Because history isn't only written by winners. Sometimes it's written by convincing liars. And the scariest part is this: you can't fact-check the past the way you fact-check a tweet. The past doesn't argue back. It just sits there, behind glass, waiting for you to believe it. Start with the obvious. People have always forged things. Coins, paintings, letters, but forgeries don't just steal money, they steal certainty, they plant evidence. And evidence is the currency of archaeology. Imagine you're an archaeologist in the early 1900s. You're desperate for physical proof that your nation, your region, your theory was important earlier than everyone else claims. You can't build a case on vibes. You need bones, tools, art, a missing link. Then someone brings you exactly that. A skull, thick, ancient-looking, found in a gravel pit in England. Alongside a jawbone, a few worn teeth, some primitive-looking stone tools. It looks like the bridge between ape and human. It arrives right when the world is obsessed with evolution, right when Darwin's idea is still fresh enough to be controversial, right when European scientists are quietly competing to find humanity's origin story and to place it near home. It's hard to overstate how perfect that would feel, not just emotionally, scientifically, because it would solve a puzzle. At the time, fossils of human ancestors were scarce and scattered. Neanderthals had been found, but they didn't fit cleanly into the story people expected. There were earlier finds from continental Europe and Asia, but Britain, despite its scientific prestige, didn't have a legendary ancient human of its own. And then suddenly it does. The artifact gets a name: Piltdown Man, Eoanthropus dawsoni, Dawson's Dawn Man, after Charles Dawson, the amateur antiquarian who reported it. The pieces seem to say something specific: a large braincase like modern humans combined with a more primitive jaw like an ape. In other words, a comforting narrative. Maybe big brains came first. Maybe intelligence was the first step and the rest of the body caught up later. That idea wasn't neutral. It matched what many experts already suspected. It matched cultural bias, too, the belief that the defining trait of being human is the brain. It also, conveniently, placed one of the most important evolutionary milestones in England. If you're watching this unfold, it doesn't feel like a scam. It feels like discovery. More evidence seems to appear. Additional fragments are found at the site. A second location, Piltdown II, is reported with similar material. That's not how hoaxes usually behave. Hoaxes are small. This one grows. And it spreads into textbooks. Museums display reconstructions. Artists draw the creature, a modern skull on a primitive face. It becomes a reference point, a cornerstone. Now the mystery deepens, because Piltdown didn't just exist on its own. It bent the way people interpreted other fossils. If a find from somewhere else didn't match Piltdown's pattern, it could be dismissed as odd or mislabeled or forced into a new category. Fossils from South Africa, like the Taung Child discovered by Raymond Dart in 1924, suggested a different story. Smaller brain, more ape-like skull, but potentially closer to humans in other ways. That challenged Piltdown's big brain first narrative. And for years, it was easier for many scientists to doubt Dart than to doubt Piltdown. You can feel how that happens. A famous artifact becomes a gravitational center. New facts orbit it. And there's a psychological trap here. Once something becomes part of the known, questioning it feels like tearing up the map. Careers get built around the map. Museum exhibits get printed. Lectures get repeated. Nobody wants to be the person who says, "I think the treasured national fossil is fake." Also, the forgery doesn't have to be perfect. It only has to be plausible enough to survive the tools of its time. And the tools of its time were limited. In the early 20th century, you couldn't just do high-precision radiometric dating on a fossil the way you can now. You could compare shapes. You could analyze context. You could argue. You could persuade. A fossil could be ancient because it looked ancient, because it came from the right kind of gravel, because it fit the story. It's almost like the artifact is not only an object, it's a negotiation. As years pass, strange details start to whisper. The jaw seems too ape-like. The wear on the teeth seems intentional. The pieces don't fit together naturally. The combination is too convenient, too symbolic. Human head, ape jaw, like a myth, not a messy accident of evolution. But the whispers are quiet, the legend is loud. Then new discoveries arrive elsewhere. In China, Peking Man is found at Zhoukoudian in the 1920s. In Indonesia, Homo erectus remains add weight to a different evolutionary timeline. In Africa, more Australopithecine fossils appear. The human story is becoming bigger, older, more complex, and Piltdown starts to look lonely. An outlier, the only one of its kind. That can happen in science. A real thing can be unique, but uniqueness is also a red flag. If a fossil represents a true stage of evolution, you expect cousins. Variants, a family. So why doesn't Piltdown have a family? Because sometimes, a hoax doesn't just fake an artifact. It fakes a missing piece in a puzzle, and once the puzzle fills in naturally, the fake piece starts to stand out. People did investigate. Not just random skeptics, but serious scientists. Over time, chemical tests improved. Fluorine dating, which compares how much fluorine bones absorb from groundwater over time, became a way to estimate relative age. It's not perfect, but it can reveal when two bones in the same skeleton did not spend the same centuries underground. In the early 1950s, a team including Kenneth Oakley at the Natural History Museum in London, along with Wilfrid Le Gros Clark and Joseph Weiner, re-examined the Piltdown material with newer methods. And then the floor dropped out. The skull fragments were not ancient in the way claimed. The jaw was not a primitive human jaw at all. It was from an orangutan. The teeth had been filed down to look human-like. The bones had been stained to mimic age and mineralization. Even the stone tools were suspicious. In 1953, Piltdown Man was publicly exposed as a forgery. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a deliberate construction. A composite of different species, altered by hand, planted in the ground, and presented as a missing link. So the artifact that rewrote history didn't rewrite it in the way you might first imagine. It didn't create a new true chapter. It delayed one. It warped attention. It made people doubt real finds and trust a fake one. That's the forger's greatest lie. Not the object itself, but the confidence it produces. Now here's the twist inside the twist. Even after 1953, the question didn't end. It multiplied. Because if Piltdown was a forgery, who forged it? Charles Dawson died in 1916, long before the hoax was revealed, and many suspect he was the main culprit. He had a pattern of discovering questionable artifacts. But certainty is hard. Over the decades, famous names were floated: Arthur Conan Doyle, Teilhard de Chardin, even museum insiders, partly because the story is irresistible. You want a mastermind. You want a villain with motive and flair. Modern analyses have leaned back toward Dawson. Studies have suggested the Piltdown pieces share consistent staining and preparation methods, hinting at one person assembling the whole thing. But even that isn't a courtroom verdict. Evidence degrades, records vanish. The past keeps its secrets. And notice what just happened. The moment the artifact is exposed, you're tempted to relax. Case closed, science wins. But the uncomfortable part is what it reveals about how science actually moves. The dominant scientific explanation is not that archaeology is unreliable. It's that archaeology is a human process that gets more reliable as methods improve, as more data arrives, as incentives shift, as outliers are challenged. In that view, Piltdown is not proof that history can be rewritten by a fake forever. It's proof that fakes can survive until reality provides enough pressure to crack them. Mainstream science points out something important. Piltdown didn't remain unchallenged because all experts were foolish. It lasted because the available tests were weak, because the find was fragmentary, and because it fit expectations. Once better dating methods and broader fossil context arrived, the hypothesis collapsed. So the same facts can be read two ways. Either one fake artifact has the power to rewrite history, or history, as a discipline, is self-correcting, just painfully slow. But here's the final conflict. Even the self-correcting story has a crack in it. Piltdown was exposed after about 40 years. That's not instant. That's a generation of textbooks, lectures, museum labels, and public imagination. A whole era of students learned a version of human evolution anchored to something that wasn't real. And Piltdown is not alone. Archaeology and related fields have faced other frauds and controversies. The Cardiff Giant in the 1800s, the Michigan Relics, the debated Glozel tablets, and modern cases like the James Ossuary inscription controversy. Not all are the same, and not all are proven hoaxes, but they point to the same vulnerability. When an object is rare, the temptation to believe becomes part of the evidence. At the same time, skepticism can become its own trap. If you walk away thinking everything could be fake, you lose the ability to learn anything at all. Real discoveries do happen. Ancient DNA is mapped. New hominin species are identified. Dating methods cross-check each other. Entire sites are excavated with transparent records. There is progress. There is rigor. So you're left in a gray zone, a place where you can't be naive and you can't be cynical. Maybe the real story isn't about one forged jawbone. Maybe it's about you, about what you're willing to accept as proof and why. Because artifacts don't just sit in the past. They live in your mind. They shape your sense of origin. They tell you what a human is, where you came from, who we are. And when an artifact is fake, it doesn't only mislead scientists. It steals something more intimate, your trust in the bridge between then and now. So the next time you stand in a museum and look at an object behind glass, remember that you're not only seeing history. You're seeing a conversation between evidence and desire, between careful measurement and human storytelling. And the most dangerous forgery isn't the one that fools you forever. It's the one that makes you realize how badly you wanted it to be true.